lifestyle. Sports cards and we live now. Jeremy Lee in the building and every guest that you ever needed. Sports cards after hours keep the hobby heated. Updates, hobby talk like you never seen it. Sports cards live and none could ever beat it. Sports cards is a lifestyle. Sports cards and we live now. Welcome to another episode of Sports Cards Live with your host, Jeremy Lee.
All right, everybody. Welcome to episode number 238 of Sports Cards Live. This is a Sports Cards Lite episode, the first one we are doing. It is September the 6th, 2024. My name is Jeremy Lee. Welcome, everybody, to the show. I'm excited to bring out our guests, the management team for the National Sports Collectors Convention. Let's bring them out. Mr. Joe Drelich, Mr. Brian Coppola, and Mr. Jim Ryan. Welcome, gentlemen, back to the show. I had you guys on with me about a year ago after you took over the management, which was after the Chicago show last year. It's been a year. How have you all been doing? Joe, how's the last year gone?
Oh, how's the last year gone? Wow, that's a big one.
Yeah, sure is.
Pedal to the metal. How about that? Pedal to the metal. It's it's been full throttle since we came on with you guys when we were, just about to start unleashing our plan for 2024, and here we are with the completion of that show. So it's full circle, I guess, as they say, right? And then here we are already putting our pencils down to the paper for 25. So.
How about you, Brian? Just want to go around the horn here, quick, hear from everybody. How's the last year gone for you, bud?
Yeah, I mean, this is an eye-opening experience. I mean, the amount of just work, associated with the national is overwhelming. But it was great. I mean, it was a great experience. Learned a lot, and just ready to start on 2025 and try to make the show that much better than we did in 2024.
Right on. I like that. Striving for always improving. I think we should all be doing that in our lives. Jim, how about you, man?
Well, you think you have a lot of time when the show's, a year down the road or a year and a half down the road when you first start working on it, and boy, it comes up quick. And like Joe and Brian said, it's a lot of work. It's down to the grindstone. It's a lot of work, and all of a sudden it's here, and it's chaotic, and it's over, and you go, wow. And then you're just trying to recoup yourself for a while here. It's been quite a process, to say the least. And we're looking forward to next year. We're working on it already.
Well, it's like I say, after every national I go to, you go home and then the countdown starts for the next one. But for us attendees, even vendors, it's not that bad. We just get to wait for it. But you guys have to start getting to work. It sounds like you're getting to work right away. Can I ask this question, which is, what are some of the first things that you guys need to do planning ahead for Chicago? And this isn't a planned question. It's kind of off topic, but I'm curious, Joe, like, what are some of these early things that you guys need to do to really get yourselves prepared for what is going to come in terms of all the organization? What are some of those early first steps?
That's one word answer: floor plan. The floor plan is the key. The floor plan is the very first thing that we do. And that's simply because, again, a lot of people aren't privy to the process, but the way the national works is a national vendor that has an existing booth. Come Friday morning, we start picking based on priorities for the following year. So the number one thing that has to be done, aside from hotels, obviously, so that goes hand in hand, but the hotels are pre-booked as well. But the floor plan has to be buttoned up, and it has to be buttoned up for the dealers, right? So the corporate space, in a nutshell, not to get too long-winded, is just carved out, right? It's not assigned yet. It really just the square footage is assigned, and we put in blocks to hold places. But the actual dealer booths are in place. They're numbered. And so the process is kind of cool. Maybe we can get you to cover that next year and see that. It's kind of neat the way that works. So the priority 44s come in first. They've got a naked floor plan to pick from, and they start checking their boxes and picking their booths. So the first thing we do is definitely the floor plan.
And are all three of you, I'm just curious how the dynamic between you three works. Are all three of you putting your heads together, meeting on these things, or do you guys delegate a lot of this stuff between the three of you? Brian?
Yeah, I mean, I think we're constantly looking over each other's responsibilities and weighing in, putting in opinions, and Joe may be the the project holder of something, or Jimmy is the project holder, but we're constantly in discussion about it, and then building our plans, and obviously all the steps that go along with it. So it's a multi-level effort.
Let's talk a bit about, well, thanks for that. Let's talk a bit about attendance. It's always interesting for me to hear about what the attendance was like at the last show. Are we breaking records? Everyone's always comparing a national to the Anaheim show in 1991. We had a big show in Cleveland this year. We had a big show in Chicago the year before. How did Cleveland's attendance rank compared to, say, Chicago the year before and Anaheim back in 91?
So the NSCC does not give out any attendance numbers. So there was never a book handed to us saying, "Hey, last year's attendance was X." How we can monitor attendance is we can monitor it by the pre-ticket sales that happen through the ticketing system, whether they're buying VIP tickets, buying one-day admissions, 5-day passes. And then we were watching that compared to last year. Everybody says last year Chicago was the biggest show. We were watching the trend of the ticket sales this year for Cleveland versus Chicago, and we kept saying, "Man, we're ahead of Chicago. We're ahead of Chicago. We're gonna break Cleveland. We're ahead of Chicago." And we just said, "What's the walk up going to be like when we get to Cleveland?" Well, based on, and I'll speak for Joe and Brian, they can jump at any time here too. Based on what our show promotions experience over the last X amount of years, when we saw the walk up and judged the traffic flow of the floor and the busyness of the booths, we feel that we broke Chicago's record last year. If Chicago was a record, we think we broke it this year in Cleveland, just based on traffic flow.
That's really impressive. I mean, Chicago was a bigger room. It felt crowded, but I mean, I was at both, and Cleveland was busy. It was a great vibe in the room too. I mean, I saw you guys walking the floor several times during the weekend. What was the vibe like for you? How did you feel walking through there in terms of just the energy of the hobby and the general feel of everybody?
I thought it was very, very busy. And as a show promoter, show manager, show promoter, you always want to look at the action on the floor. What I mean by that is you look and see if the crowd's just wandering around the room, they're just walking down the aisles. When you looked at all the booths inside the room, every booth was crowded. There was people at every single booth. All the corporate areas were crowded. It was just very, very busy and exciting. We call it the show buzz. The show buzz was on in Cleveland. There was the buzz in the room.
I certainly felt that as well. So we think Cleveland beat Chicago in terms of attendance. What about next year in Chicago, 2025? Are you projecting even more than Cleveland and Chicago in 2023, what we had in Chicago in 2023? Because the hobby seems to be on good momentum right now. We're back in Chicago, a bigger room in terms of square footage, more booths. Joe, what do you feel like is going to happen attendance-wise next year? And are you guys already thinking about projections? Do you do projections?
A couple of things there. So, for us, we're always careful to project and build up false anticipations or anything like that. Factually speaking, what I can speak to is that our housing, which is handled by an independent company that's been there for over 20 years. The gentleman's name is Greg that we deal with. And he's been a staple at the national. Basically, when the dealers pick their booths, they're allowed to pick hotel rooms as well. And we do know that the hotel sales have been the most aggressive ever right now after post Cleveland. So one of the early recommendations we'll make, and we're sort of telling everybody we know is definitely don't wait, like book your hotels now. So that's one indicator that would say where we're headed. Economy is something you can't control or know what that is going to look like. But what I can say is this team, Brian, Jimmy, and myself are committed to putting on a better event every single year. Like that's our absolute goal. Like we put together the plan for 24. We feel like we executed it very well. One of the things that we all feel collectively is the building takes enough blame if we were, and this is our goal in the future, if we were to pick that show up and plop it into a new facility like in Atlanta, like a Houston, like in Anaheim, 90% of the issues that existed at that show, they disappear instantly, right? You drop that show into a facility that is able to handle it. We're all looking at it, very differently. But we really think that the show that we put on, based in the facility that it was in, we're proud of it. With the limitations the building had, and we saw some really good things that we did that we can grow. And then there's some elements that we want to add with the new facility in Rosemont and the additional square footage. So, we're optimistic that we'll continue to push the needle forward for sure.
Right on. I can speak to the hotels because for the very first time in my 17 nationals, I have already booked my hotel for next year. I never booked it until maybe 6 weeks ahead.
Good
I've
move.
booked mine.
Yeah, good move.
Yeah, I'm pretty happy about that. I feel much more calm about it right now.
Yeah,
I want to ask you takeaways from Cleveland. The national that just was. You guys dealt with some challenges in real time at this show, whether it was lineups at the food trucks, the bathrooms, the parking to get in. I mean, I remember driving up and we're like, wow, it was backed up all up the interstate. What did you guys learn from this? Were you able to react quickly and address those as best you could? And what do you think what are your takeaways as we move forward into future nationals in future years? Who's good for you want to take this one, Jimmy or Brian? You're nodding your head. I'll leave it to you guys.
I'll take it if you want.
Sure,
Okay.
go for it. Sure.
I mean, so we made whatever changes we could. We opened up some additional bathrooms. We changed the actual parking lot flow to get people in and out of the parking lot faster. But again, like Joe touched on, there was some things that we couldn't change just because of the building that we were in. The IX Center was fantastic to work with. They moved with us and changed whatever we could, but we handled the changes as best as we could. And like any good plan, you always think you have it figured out when you walk into a show, and there's always going to be something that gets you that you have to modify and change that day. It's just part of being a show manager.
So Jeremy, did we had seven site visits to Cleveland? Was that the official number, guys?
Yeah, 6 or 7, somewhere around there.
So, and then a 7-day stay prior to the show, and I mean, you keep combing those details out, those little details, just to make sure that you're gonna cover everything. But some things just happen in real time, and you just have to just adapt to it, right? Because you never know. You don't have a problem until you have a problem. And too many people coming at one time is a great problem, but you have to react. So it just. Mm-hmm. But once you experience once, you experience it once. You can better prepare.
And I mean, we have 3 years in a row now in Chicago, which I think a lot of us are happy about. I know I certainly am. If we collectively, the hobby and the national, go back to IX Center, I have to think that you guys you'll remember what happened there and at least work with them to plan it as best you can moving forward. What else, if anything, did you guys kind of take away from your first time in charge of the national? Was there, I mean, that was obviously kind of a lot of talk. There was a lot of talk about those issues that we just kind of summarized there quickly. Was there anything else that you guys took away from it that you feel you learned from that you can improve upon in the future? I'll just leave this one open to any of you. If nothing, that's okay too.
Yeah, I mean, definitely I can speak to the corporate side of things. That tends to where I spend a lot of my time with the corporate booths and sponsorships. We were severely challenged there with square footage. And so we were putting our best foot forward. I was leaning on Jimmy and Brian for advice and just sort of how to keep as many corporates happy as we possibly could, given the limitations that we had. And one of the things that I certainly learned was the value of your decorators. Your decorators, the decorating company that you use gives you really, really good advice. And without getting too deep into that, what I'll say is you need significant aisleways separating your corporate booths. And I made some decisions to sacrifice a little bit of that, to fit some extra corporates in there. So that was definitely a lesson learned. And that's just an honest, transparent viewpoint from me, that you have to value every square foot because it matters. And these build outs for the corporates have just become so massive and so impressive. And the corporates are really doing a wonderful job of giveaways and integration and customer experience. So that's my quick one that comes to mind for me, where I'm certainly already working on that process for next year. And thankfully, we do have more square footage in that space. And just to touch on that briefly, and I'll let Jimmy and Brian jump in here, but we've already actually been out to Cleveland for 2025. We went out last week.
Chicago.
Yeah, thank you. Chicago, for our first walkthrough of the building. We've been there a lot. Obviously we're there every other year, but this is just the way we do things. As many times as we've been there, now it's ours to build our way. So we spent an entire 8-9 hour day there, just really kind of looking at the floor plan that's in place, double checking everything, making sure things are exactly the way we want them. And, we've already made some notes on some tweaks. So
anything to add to that, Jim, Brian?
Yeah, I mean, line management is probably, that's a full-time course right there in itself.
Mm-hmm.
The amount of people that come in and how fast they come in and where they come from, and and just I could you have 20 doors at the entrance, and you got a 5,000 square foot atrium, and now what? And so there's that's just its own thing right there. I think we definitely surprised the food vendors inside there with the amount of people that came through. I mean, we were doing a lot of planning and explaining, are you guys ready for really how many people are going to come? Oh yeah, we're ready. Oh my God. And that's on Sunday. The staff of the IX Center was like, what happened? So, I mean, these are all, it's good stuff.
As much as these things may have been, frustrating for some attendees, I look at this all as good news. And I'm also a big fan of let's learn and move forward and do better. And I feel like you guys are a team that will ensure that that's the spirit of the show. So I'm happy about that. I want to just address everybody in the chat, guys. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for your comments. I'm not going to be taking questions right now, but I appreciate what I'm seeing in there, because I'm going to be reviewing the chat later, and we're going to do a part 2 of this in the next little bit, and we will address a bunch of those questions at that time. But I do see you all and acknowledge, and please keep on suggestions, questions, feel free to put them in there. We will be I will be looking at them later, and we will then do another part. But we have some things to get through here tonight. Trade nights, guys. Trade nights. They were expanded to be officially sanctioned trade nights by the National at the Convention Center. How did those go from your guys' perspective? And do you anticipate continuing to do that in Chicago for the next 3 years? How about who's good for this one? Is this a Joe or a Jim or a Brian question?
Before we actually go there real quick, and Jim can take this, it's no problem. I'm kind of peeking at the chat over here a little bit too. One of the things I want to say is, for everybody that's listening, everybody that's in that chat, you guys can absolutely send an email direct to info@NSCC. Feel free to address it to Joe, to Jim, to Brian. With real legitimate concerns. I'm reading one over here about a disabled person that had some hard times. We're very conscious of these things that are in the chat here, and they're definitely things like we will take this chat and we will take notes from this chat and we will address these issues too. I know we're being respectful of Jeremy's design of the show today, so this is not us not wanting to answer or deal with these questions. We 100% want to make the improvement in the customer experience much better. So, please feel free to email us directly, and we'll certainly respond to you guys.
Well said, Joe. Well said.
Yeah.
Appreciate that on behalf of the audience, Joe. Thank you for that. Trade nights. Let's get back to that now. Trade nights. How did they go? Are we going to be doing them in the future? What are your because at the beginning of time, they were privately organized and put on, and now they fell under I don't really know the full way they were organized, but they were, I believe, sanctioned by the NSCC and in the facility. Personally, I thought that was excellent myself. How did you guys feel it went? And what do you see happening in 2025 and forward? Jim, we'll put this one to you.
We thought it went well. I think the attendance was approximately 4,000 people a night, somewhere around there. I think is the official number that was in SCD. If I think I read it, I think I read it in SCD. We plan on doing it next year. Same thing. We view the National as Disneyland, right? You go to Disneyland. You're going to the National as Disneyland. You want to keep your people in Disneyland. Let's bring the trade night into Disneyland. And that was our goal. We talked about this last year. Out of three of us, that was our goal, to bring everybody and keep everybody inside Disneyland here. I think it worked out well. Everybody was excited about it. We got nothing but positive feedback on it. So yes, we're all going to continue it next year and future shows going forward. I mean, actually, when we look for facilities, we're going to look for rooms that are big enough to also hold a trade night too. That's part of the facility look at too.
I think we cleaned up. We helped to address some of the overflow in the hotels.
Mm-hmm.
Which could be good or bad depending on how you want to look at that. But by bringing it in house, it will help with, from a Marriott sake. Thanks for not having everybody all over our floors. But again, depending on how you look at that. But
the best part of the trade night too, to me, is that there's obviously such a big appetite, right, for the actual transactional piece of the show, which to touch on briefly, that's the heartbeat of the National. It always has been, and it always will be. There's a lot of really great things happening around us in our space. Everybody knows the big events that are happening. It's fantastic. There's a lot of great things happening. But what we're committed to is putting on the greatest baseball card, sports card show, sports memorabilia show in the United States and in the world, for that matter. That's first and foremost. It's not to say that we won't have additional activities and be inclusive of kids, because those are top priorities for us. Mm-hmm. But ultimately, if you look at the floor plan that we put out in Cleveland, it was clearly designed that when you walked in that front door, you saw nothing but a sea of cards. And that was designed specifically for that way. And that's what our motto is going forward, is to make sure that the National is the greatest card show that there is, period. And that, like you said at the beginning of the show, people, the minute it ends, people are already excited and thinking about next year's show. Right. So, and to spin that into trade night a little bit, that was another piece of pride for us, because whenever you have an event this big, whether it's a baseball card show or a electronics show, if there's a large amount of demand and there's the supply is a little bit limited, ancillary events are going to pop up in the background and different things are going to happen. Whether we sanction them or don't sanction them, what we did was we put forward a triple trade night that was amazing in the basement of the IX Center for free, no charge to people that were exhibiting, no charge to customers that were walking around. And that was the goal. The goal was to just give the ultimate value. And that's another thing that the National provides that we're super proud of is the bang for your buck. Nobody can show me something that can beat that in our industry. For the dollar amount that you can spend to buy a ticket for a mom, a dad, if you got kids that are 12 and under, you can walk in that door for $50. And you show me another place that you can do that and get that kind of an experience. So, that's our bar. That's what we work towards. And we try to figure out a way to take those numbers and put the best experience that we can. And this was year one for us. And, we definitely appreciate the comments, the critiques, the criticisms, because that's what's going to make us put a better show on, right? We're fine with the hard stuff, right? You got to tell us the negative stuff. There's 100,000+ people in the building. We can't see everybody, but we want to know. We want to know. We want to make it better for everybody.
I thought, you make a good point there that the trade nights they're connected to the National. They flow from it, but they are different. And I went down there. It's a different sort of event down there. And so there is more bang for your buck. The admission fee can get you into that as well. And that is added value for the attendees for sure. I want to ask, here's another, a new question, open-ended question. Like, are you guys encouraged for the future of the hobby, sort of after all the enthusiasm that we saw there in Cleveland, and with other shows now coming into the mix? Like, how will the National keep its spot as the paramount event in the hobby while there is competition, more competition now out there for collector travel dollars and spending dollars and such? I mean, you said, Joe, like the goal is to make it the best card show in North America, the world. That belt is on firmly right now. How do you guys intend to maintain that moving forward? Brian.
I think you stay doing what you're doing. We need to stay in our lane and stay focused on what that show does best. 150 autograph guests, free trade night, 600 plus vendors, every corporate you can ever think of. The bottom line is it's a baseball card show. That's what it is. Other people may have other products, but at the end of the day, this is the best of its kind. And I think we just have to upgrade the tweaks. We tweak things, but the basis of the business is there. As long as I think we just have to stay in line for the most part and just, continue to fuel what's working well.
Yeah. I mean,
right, guys? I mean, where am I? Yeah.
Sure. I think the blueprint is there. And I think, it's clear what people want when they come to the National. There's certainly a bells and whistles piece of it, but the majority is people just want to buy and they just want to sell. And that gets proven to us every time a trade night happens, right? Mm-hmm. If we were meeting the expectations and then they were done, everybody would leave at 6 o'clock and go to dinner and wait for tomorrow. Yeah. That's not the case. So the transactional piece of it, because downstairs at trade night, there are some giveaways, there are some activities happening. Primarily, it's still a continuation of the main show. It's buying, selling, look at my cards. This is for my PC. This is what, do you want to trade for this? This is that piece of it. It's in people's blood. And that's what we want to accentuate. We want to get the piece that you're there for, that helps you, get away from the world for 3 or 4 or 5 days and just escape into, whether it's your childhood or your memories or your favorite team or your favorite athlete. That's the enhancement. And that's what we're looking to tap into even harder than we already are. And, to Brian's point, that's been the key to the success. So there's not going to be much deviation from it, but we are going to improve it. And we are going to sprinkle and add sprinkles to it. But we are going to just continue to refine it and make the experience better overall.
So what are some of the changes? Like, I want to look forward now to the next 3 years. We've kind of debriefed Cleveland at this point. I feel looking forward to the next 3 years in a row in Chicago. It's early stage planning right now, but what can you tell us about the 2025 National that you haven't yet? Anything that you've already, you guys are, I'm sure throughout the show, the week in Cleveland, the weeks after, right through till now, I got to think that you guys, I talked to this person, they said that, or I noticed this. There must be a few things that you've already thought of. We got to do that next year. What can you share with us about in that sort of idea?
I think the one thing that comes to mind to me is, the kid element was really done very, very well by one of our corporate vendors, Sports Card Investor. He took it upon himself to create a lot of space inside of his own booth to create card kid trade zones and be very, very thoughtful and mindful of kids coming into the space, whether it's teaching them how to negotiate, understanding how to curate and collect. That element to us is important, the teaching element. So I think that there'll be some more of that there. Right now it's so early to kind of like start to talk about 2025, what we have planned. What I would say is some of the things that we did do. A lot of people don't know about our dealer party, but we reintroduced a dealer party on Tuesday as a welcome to all the dealers and corporates that were there. Basically, in a nutshell, the setup stopped at 4:30 on Tuesday. We had a big stage. We had a big open food and conversation about our charity events. That's another piece that's important to us. The towns and the communities that we're going to come into, we feel it's important to support. We did a really good job, I thought, in our first year raising a lot of money. Those announcements will be coming out in the next 7 to 10 days about all the money we raised for 3 different charities from the city of Cleveland. And again, I don't think that there's any big wow gotchas at this point, but, see us in 6 or 7 months when we have a lot of things buttoned up. What I can tell you is a lot of our corporate partners have circled back already and want to expand on some of the giveaways and some of the interactives that they did. So those pieces, as we get them, we'll be happy to come back on and after the first of the year or, first quarter of next year when things starting to tighten up for us and share, some of the newness. But again, it's going to be the best card show that there can be. That's going to be the main focal point. Will we have additional things and enhancements? Yeah, I mean, logistics, if you want to talk about that side of it, okay. Touch on Chicago 2023 for a minute, right? There were obviously issues with, one of the biggest issues was the temperature in the building, right? Yeah. We already tested that issue out in Cleveland, right? The show started on July 25th. Brian, Jimmy, and Joe got to Cleveland July 16th. 9 days prior, the buildings were being taped out so that we could move all the large corporates into their spaces to keep the building cool. So just a little thing like that, logistically, making sure a lot of the big move-ins happen and those big giant doors in Chicago can stay shut. That in itself will be a logistical change that will be a major upgrade, to 2023 Chicago. So that's one little.
Jeremy, yeah, we moved our schedule up a couple days just to clarify for Joe. We moved our loaded schedule up a couple days for many efforts. The build outs of the corporates now are getting bigger and bigger. And PSA had a double-decker booth, you may have noticed, and a few other companies did too. And so we were concerned about keeping the building cool and obviously getting these build outs done in time. So that was definitely a coordinated effort that paid dividends.
It was very good.
We actually even moved up our dealer movement a little bit too. We had some dealers drop off stuff early, and that, from what we got feedback, was from the Tuesday and Wednesday, the dealer load-in was probably most dealers were saying was one of the easiest load-ins they ever had. Same thing. It's all about being out there, like Joe and Brian touched on, coordination and backing everything up, logistics, backing it up a few days.
Nice.
So it helped everything out, all the way from the corporates all the way down to the dealers getting set up on time at the end.
Yeah. And, I can see that a happier dealer means, easier deal flow, which probably means happier customers too, if I can draw that butterfly effect through the thing. Joe, you were mentioning, the way the kids were being served specifically by the sports card investor booth. I walked by there. I had to almost step over kids at times. There were so many there, and that's where they was at that booth. Well, I'm sure they were all over, but I saw, I want to say dozens doesn't do it justice. I want to say hundreds of kids.
Well, and I guess that's the one leak I can give to you, right? Because Jimmy and Brian and I actually talked about this today. We're going to be helping in the square footage aspect of things and the production piece of that with Jeff and his team for 2 years in a row. They've taken it upon themselves, and he deserves to be commended for it. They did an amazing job, him and his team, and we're gonna support that as much as we can.
Right on. Mm-hmm. Any sort of concerns, guys, at the Stevens Center in Chicago that the National is outgrowing it? How do you you said you did a visit already? What is it looking like for these upcoming years? And are we already obligated to that building for 2025, 26, and 27 out of curiosity?
I guess the growing piece is a real reality, and the industry, I think everybody thought it was going to cool down at some point between, COVID and now. And, now it's like, well, this is here, and it's really, really here. And, maybe we go through another big burst. So, yeah, I mean, sure. I'm sure the building could be, not compromised, but, challenged. I think that's a solid possibility.
I mean,
are we committed to the Stevens Center, Jimmy, moving forward after 2025?
Right now, the center is on the docket for the next 3 years, 25, 26, and 27.
And what about post 20? Has there been any talk yet about post 2027 where the national will be, or is that going to go out to dealer vote in the next year or 18 months, something like that?
So we start our site selection process, 2028. And as we've all realized, as Joe actually touched on beginning of the interview here, is we're going to look at more modern facilities. Okay, and that process starts with basically looking at square footage, looking at hotels around the area, looking at airports around the area, and obviously looking at dates. And that process is going to start soon. The dealers will be voting on a selection of sites coming when they pick their booth in 2025 for 2026, when they pick their booth in July of 2025. We actually improved that process last year, 2 years ago, guys, 2 years ago, right? We improved that process where we now have the dealers now select the site when they pick their booth. So basically you walk in there, like Joe explained in the beginning, you walk in, you pick your booth for the next year. Well, that is a form, but you got to check off what site you want to pick at for 2028. The advantage of that was the old way of doing it was mail out ballots, get the paper ballots back, and you would get a smaller return of voting. This basically everybody had to pick a site. So you get more accurate voting. And again, we're going to try to give the best facilities that are available that can hold us, again, based on hotels, size. We need a facility that's at least 600,000 or 700,000 square feet. Okay, that's the size facility we need. Cleveland was about 500,000 square feet. Chicago's 600 and change, and that's what we need, 700,000 square feet.
And we're conscious of the newness of the facility.
Correct.
We recognize the limitations of some of the buildings that the National's been sort of in the last decade or two, and we're very mindful of that and the cities that we're exploring. And yes, they're absolutely, West Coast is a top priority for us. What most people don't understand is West Coast is one of the most difficult to get and lock it in for the dates that we need. We don't have a calendar that exists 365 days where we can call up Anaheim or Los Angeles or San Francisco and say, hey guys, give us any date you have and we'll move the National there. Again, there's really no compromise. We are actually trying to expand the dates a little bit, to the fronter part of July and one more week into August. So it'll give us, maybe 6 weeks, 5 to 6 weeks to pick from instead of 3 weeks. But based on that, and I know we covered this before, so I won't be long-winded about this, but when you call a convention center like Anaheim, for instance, and you say, we want to come there in 3 years, your phone, you're losing connection already. And then when you say, we just want to come in once and we're not coming back again, then you get a dial tone. Then you're done. And that's just simply as honest and as candid as we can be. That's literally how it works. If we could make magic happen and pop in on the West Coast, we understand it hasn't been there in 30 years. We get it, and we understand that the collector base has surged there. But it is definitely on our list. And as Jimmy said, large convention centers are what we need. Brian can speak to, the aspect of Wi-Fi and having a really good building that's suited for what our needs are. Those are our top priorities. Those are our top priorities. We need hotels in walking distance. We need restaurants in walking distance. We need impeccable Wi-Fi service. We need a beautiful convention center, and we need a reasonable rate, right? We need it to be economically. That's one of the beauties and the magic of the National is the National leaves a lot of money in the collector's pocket to spend with the vendors, and there's a recipe that's happening there. It's the success.
Brian, can you address the Wi-Fi for a moment? Because it's always, it's always a concern at the National. And
so look, I mean, it's Jeremy. Look, it's simple. Cleveland, it was a tough building. It was an airport hangar. It's an airport hangar from 1942, and we're retrofitting modern technology, and Wi-Fi technology isn't perfected, nor is cellular technology inside of a convention center. And then we drop, 100,000 people inside there. But the biggest issue was they didn't have a cellular network to support all the devices. So we had to do something with the cellular network. So we had to put on the Wi-Fi. We didn't have a choice. There was nowhere I couldn't put it in a balloon, So we put it on the Wi-Fi and the Wi-Fi bent. We never broke it. We just bent it. But it's not, it's not ideal. And so we have to, in planning with Chicago, we have to do better, and that's already in the pipe. And so we're going to see how all that progresses. But if you get into a building that was built in 2022 or 2016, these challenges don't exist there. They're already done. They already built it 10 years into the future. So you walk in and some of these things are a little more turnkey. So back to, if we weren't, I don't want to knock Cleveland. It was a fantastic show there, but there were problems, bathroom, parking, and Wi-Fi. And if we go to a newer facility, those things should pretty much go away.
Okay. And
Yeah, Joe.
And I don't mean to monkey wrench what you told your audience earlier, but just in case we can't get back on for a part 2, for a while, I see a couple little questions here. Is it okay if I just answer them? If that's okay.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Go ahead.
I see one here that says, I would love to see Wednesday be open all day, not just for a few hours. That's something that's in our conversations right now. Right. Is the adequacy of the shopping experience, right? How much time you can actually spend on the floor. So to that particular vintage card collector, that is definitely something on our list. The next one I'd like to touch on is the next one down. I think you guys should hold a voting at the National, let the hobby pick the location. So again, to Jimmy's point, in case you didn't hear that, what we did was we made it mandatory for the dealers to have to vote for the location. In years past, it was optional, right? You received the location of the city and it was optional for you to send it back in, meaning we got a small percentage of the dealers. So hypothetically, let's just say we have 400 dealers. We were getting a small percentage of the response. Now we get 100%. So now every single dealer, before they pick their booth, they have to vote. The board does not have anything in the system that's in place, the way the National is structured, for the public to vote yet, but that's certainly not a bad idea. But just to let you know, our voting is exponentially improved to the point where it's basically just about 100% vote.
That's great. That's great to hear, Joe. I do think that what this guy is asking though is the attendees. Yeah. Let that's what he's getting at. Do you want to address the question from that angle? Is that something that is practical to do? And I mean, I don't know if it would be or wouldn't be.
Yeah, I mean, I guess what I would say in that respect is the NSCC email is always open. So if is it Terp Enforcer? If Terp Enforcer wants to rally the troops and put together some voting and get get those names on papers and send them in, we'll certainly present it and say, hey, listen, we've gotten some outside feedback and this is what everybody's saying. But again, I heard a lot of people calling for Atlanta, but what people don't realize is Atlanta was on the vote in 2023 for 2026, and Atlanta finished third. And we love the facility. Jimmy and Brian went down there. I wasn't able to get out of the airport, but Jimmy and Brian went down there and were FaceTiming me and calling me. We were all for Atlanta, and we were glad Atlanta made the final cut. But ultimately, the dealers choose the location, and Atlanta finished third. It was Chicago, Atlantic City. And if you guys remember, again, not to be long-winded, but Atlantic City came back into the fold because they offered a very big compensation package to the dealers, and it still wasn't enough, But we, as the management team, had to present that as an option. Again, real quick, we provide 6, 8, 10 locations. We present that to the board. They vote and get it down to 3, and then those 3 go out to the dealers. That's how the process works.
Right.
We started with 27 or 28.
One adjustment I would make, and because you mentioned to Terp Enforcer, rally the troops. Before Terp Enforcer does that, I think he needs to know what the site list is, because you don't want them voting for Grand Forks, North Dakota, when obviously it's not going to happen there. they would. So if Turpin Forcer wants to get going on this, reach out to you guys so that you can send him the site list and he can then rally the troops at that point, right?
So, yeah, unfortunately, we have to get the site list together.
Yeah,
as we don't, because we have to find the availabilities, for that reason. So,
yeah. All right, guys, we're coming up on we're at 45 minutes here. I wanted to keep this is a Sports Cards Lite episode, shorter version of the long episodes that I do on Saturday nights. But any sort of long-term goals that you guys are thinking of, we've already kind of covered some of it, but anything else to add as we go past 2025 for the show? Any innovation you can think of that you might be trying to do, or is it more just baby steps and kind of always improving on what we're doing? Any of you want to go ahead, Brian?
Look, I think if you get into a different city with the right building, the capabilities expand on what you can do. So, you look at the property of Cleveland, and we're on old airport ground there. So, you go to a place where there's a football stadium connected to it. I think opportunities are going to open up right then and there. So, I think a part of it just has to go with where do we land.
Right on. Yeah. Okay. No, fair enough. I know that is a tough question for anybody who's, I feel like anybody watching this right now has been to the National, or they're planning to go already. But, what can people start doing now outside of booking a hotel room? Because that's important. Obviously, that's going to be maybe more important than ever for Chicago next year. Maybe the answer to this is book your Chicago hotel for 2026. Maybe that's what we should do to get prepared. But what can you think? What would you advise people to do and start thinking about now to get ready for the National next year? Joe, Brian, Jimmy, I'll leave that open to any of you to speak up.
I mean, I'll joke around. I mean, save your money, right? And promote the show. You know what I mean? Buy more cards. We have a lot of work to do, and we just have to start setting the stage. And I think everything else will start to fall.
Will we have more vendors in Chicago than we had in Cleveland?
There are about 50 more booths in Chicago than it was in Cleveland.
50 more. And then I don't know, in terms of site list, Vintage Oddball makes a comment in the chat right now, speaking to LA and Las Vegas. I see a lot of people, kind of shouting from the rooftop saying Vegas. And I think to myself, if I'm a vendor, it can go one of two ways.
Yeah.
The customers can lose their money in the casino, or they can make a lot of money in the casino. Vegas, I don't know how family friendly it is, although a lot of families go. Is Vegas something that could make it on to the official list that goes out to voting at some point?
I think I have an answer there that's common for Jim and Brian and I that we discussed. We always want the National to be the focal point of the event. So really noisy outside ancillary type of things are a little bit of a detractor. I know the National's been in Atlantic City before. Vegas certainly isn't off the table. It certainly isn't off the table. One of the biggest difficulties, quite frankly, with Vegas is if you think hotel prices are expensive in Chicago, in Vegas they could be north of $1,000 a room a night. When you bring in the kind of crowd that Vegas brings in on a normal basis, and then you add 150,000 more people in a 5-day period, that could really create. And that's not something that the National has any control over. We can't call up Caesars and say, hey guys, you've heard of us, we're the National, hold us your hotel for $300 a night. This doesn't work that way. And one of our, pieces of consciousness that we try to carry is value, right? We want people to have money in their pockets so that they can go spend it, and so that dealers can make it as well. So, Vegas is certainly on the list because it's also, we consider it a West Coast location. But I don't know that it's an ideal location. Yeah.
We talk about hotel availability and capacities in the areas. We also talk about what could people do to prepare? Something I'm noticing more and more people are doing is grabbing a group of people together and getting an Airbnb in the city that the show is at. Has that come into your, thought, into your whole planning and thoughts as to what is the Airbnb capacity, and should we be pushing more people to try and stay at Airbnbs? has that come through your mind?
I don't think it's anything we've talked about, but I think it's almost like something that people do on their own at this point, because we know a lot of people that stayed in Airbnbs and quite honestly, a lot of corporates, like they got big Airbnbs. I don't know that we promote it, right? Like I don't know that that's anything we promote, guys, right?
No, we don't promote it now, but like Joe said, we've heard a lot of people that just stayed there on their own. Usually a group of people get it together and go get the Airbnb. They'll get together with their friends. They travel out together and they'll rent the Airbnb out for a week. That's what's been going on.
A question from Jeff Hart in the chat about the Stevens Center. He says, will more of the available floor space come up similar to last time? Is there still more room to expand in that center? I mean, you guys mentioned you've already been out there one time. Is it going to be the same? Let me ask, and I don't, not to put you on the spot, but you may just say you haven't done this yet, but have you thought about kind of the traffic flow of the room at the Stevens Center, or the rooms at the Stevens Center? And are there other rooms that would be available to you for the event?
I mean, when we were out there last week, we were looking at the traffic flow, talking amongst ourselves. As Joe said, we're out there for about 8-9 hours in the room, and the entire Stevens Center on the lower level will be used, just like it was back in 2023.
Okay.
So that whole entire level, it's gonna be back to the same size it was in 2023,
which was a good size, and that was the biggest it had ever been at that point.
Mm-hmm.
All right, yeah, Joe, go ahead, Joe.
I was going to say one thing I can add there is the Breakers Pavilion, and that's become a very popular piece of the show. We again, due to square footage limitations, the Breakers Pavilion was severely compromised and had to be shrunk way down. And I do think that they did a fantastic job making the most of that space. And if anybody saw the digital screen, it was amazing. So the good news is for the Breaker Pavilion fan, it will be more than double what it was in Cleveland. It's a much bigger footprint in a new space than it was in 2023. It's got a new home. So anybody that's in that space and area will be excited and happy to know that it's more than double. It might even be close to triple, quite honestly.
Yeah.
And Jeremy, we owe 100 thank yous to the NSCC, the board, our staff, the Case Break, TriStar, Dave Marino, and everybody else that I didn't, and the customers and the dealers, because they made this whole event, and I just wanted to say that real quick.
Yeah, that's a good one, Brian. I mean, a lot of people don't know that. I mean, everything that Brian just said, and the trade night was the mastermind of Mr. Marino, and a lot of people in the hobby know David very well, and he's become a favorite of ours, and we really like working with David, and Ludex did a fantastic job. So it's only right to give some shout outs to a lot of people that went above and beyond, and really they took it as seriously as we did, and David Gelfman over at Case Breaks, and Bobby and Jeff at TriStar, that's for sure.
Board.
Well, I'll tell you what, Dave Marino is a good buddy of mine, and I was excited to see him at the National in Cleveland. I think I saw him all of about 120 seconds.
Yeah.
So he was definitely busy, and I saw a bunch of his staff running around. And that, Joe, you mentioned earlier about, to the chat who might be posting questions and comments. Can you do that one more? Because we're wrapping this up right away. Can you just kind of mention that again to everybody who has put questions and comments? We have people coming in and out of here, and then we're going to wrap this up, if you don't mind, Joe.
Yeah. Feel free. We'll definitely come back on Jeremy's show. Again, like I told Jeremy, we don't do a whole lot of shows. We feel like this is a good platform to communicate messaging. Your fans are really supportive and really diehard hobby people. So anything or concerns that you guys have, please direct them right to the NSCC inbox. You can direct them to me, to Brian, to Jimmy, to all of us, and we'll certainly take them seriously and address them. We do try to answer as many of these questions as we possibly can. We try to be as transparent as we can. So, and again, we'll come back on, and I don't know exactly what the time frame will be, but when we have some more news, and we'll make that the 2025 Chicago show the focal point.
So the chat, as you guys have been contributing to throughout this episode, will be reviewed by the management team here. And when we have them back on Sports Cards Live, and whenever that will be, they will be addressing, and we'll remember these. You guys can we'll look at them and we'll address them to make sure. But tonight's not the night for all of them. But thank you everybody for joining us in the chat, as always, for an episode of Sports Cards Lite here on Sports Cards Live. I want to thank you, Joe Drelich, Brian Coppola, Jimmy Wright. Say it again.
All
Brian.
right, it's Coppola.
Coppola. I probably said it right last night. Brian
right.
Coppola, Jimmy Ryan. Thank you guys so much for taking the time to sit here with me, and of course with the people in the chat that are watching right now, providing their comments, and of course everyone who will be watching and listening to this in the future weeks ahead. So guys, thank you very much. Hang tight right there. You three, chat guys, everybody. Thanks again. I will be back here for Sports Cards Live tomorrow night with Michael Ham, who I see in the chat. Have a good night tonight, everybody. We'll see you back here tomorrow. Thanks again for joining.